So back in 2004 was when I first did my courses with Rick and went through the usual procedure I'm sure that most of you have been through with him for all the courses that he offered. And for my part too, I found that Rick was a very generous teacher in a way. He certainly had his views and opinions about the way things should be. But by and large, in terms of the hypnosis that he taught, he was for me, a very generous teacher. He kind of taught you, I think, everything that he knew. So it was quite a good start. I might say that I started into hypnosis then because I'd been working with the Samaritans previous to that, and I'd been with them for many years. This is part-time I'm talking about there, but nonetheless it was a fairly heavy commitment that I had there for 22, 23 years with the Samaritans, and I learnt just so much from them, so much in the way that they could teach you to use listening as a therapy. Because when people call in to the Samaritans there's certainly a percentage of people there that are really right at the very end of their tether. They've already been usually around all the doctors, they've probably been in and out of hospital a fair bit. They know the ropes, the people that are calling there, especially the people that are quite desperate and sort of ready to kill themselves. So it's quite an intense kitchen to work in, if you like, there at the Samaritans, because you're kind of right up at the coalface and you really do have to learn quite quickly. It was a place too where people would burn out very, very quickly. We'd have sort of people coming and training and learning how to do it, and then only staying maybe 2 or 3 months. Such was the burnout rate with it. Some people would stay longer, for a year or more, but when I think back, for me, staying there over 20 years, 22, 23 years was really probably, there have been people that have been there longer, I might say, but nonetheless it was a process that I loved, and I loved learning that process of listening to people. But I did realise from there that there was a class of people that would call in there that were that we just couldn't help, really. The listening, they really needed something more just to sort of prod them out of the rut that they were in a little bit more. And that's really when I started thinking about hypnosis and just how that might work. So that's really, and coupled with that, of course, the other thing that I should say, just maybe to let you know a little bit about my background, I have been a Buddhist for many years, and I've really enjoyed that process. I've found a lot about myself through the Buddhist process, and a lot about the world and the universe that we live in. I think the meditation, I've been lucky to have very skilled meditation teachers over the years to sort of teach me the ropes of this whole thing, and that very much it kind of guides me really in what I do in life, and just really how I see the universe, because and the world that we're all living in. So that I should say has always been there just as a background for me. And of course past lives figure very, very big in the Buddhist tradition. In fact, now even there's a sort of movement afoot to perhaps try and downgrade the importance of past lives. That Buddhism is a sort of a good enough religion that you can make work without past lives. But that's certainly not what the Buddha taught, and it's certainly not the way that I see how things work with my own practice. So it was very interesting for me to come along and learn about hypnosis and see how hypnosis was a process of dissociation. Getting into the subconscious mind, as opposed to meditation, which was a process of unification. When you're unifying your mind, you're letting go stuff that it's not really at all about attainment. When you're practicing meditation, it's about letting go. You let go of the conditions of your mind and just try and practice to be with the stillness that's just naturally there in the present moment. So as you're doing that, you're kind of building up a momentum towards a sort of a unification into the present moment. There's probably a whole lot I could say about that, but it's a little bit off the topic today, so I won't sort of go too much further than that, except just to say that the present moment, of course, is a very important thing for us to understand, this moment right here and now. And the meditation is a process that actually encourages you to look at that, to uncover the moment, to see where the absolute truth, the reality of what we are doing is right here and now in the moment. And of course, when you're doing that, you are kind of working towards the subconscious mind as well. And I think that's where sort of hypnosis kind of naturally slotted in for me there, being able to sort of see the subconscious mind and in the same way that you can do with meditation. As your meditation gets more and more still and more peaceful, there's certainly any of the issues that you've got in your life, any past traumas or trials and troubles that you might have had, they certainly start to show themselves for you, and you can work with them in meditation. So my hypnosis career sort of started off fairly bumpy at the start. I had a hard job finding a sort of slot to fit into just with clients, because Rick, he's a fairly, well, I would say, he's certainly an authoritative hypnotist anyway, isn't he? He's kind of, I've never really been able to do that. I haven't got that ability to be, you will do this, and especially with the smokers and that. When I hear some of the smoking hypnotherapists, the way that they kind of talk to their clients, it makes me wince. I just can't kind of quite get there. I definitely needed a gentler technique than the way he does it. But having said that, I recognise that people that do hypnosis in that way are very excellent and skilled people and are well needed. There is a proportion of our population out there that really do need an authoritative hypnotist, but unfortunately I wasn't that person. So I was looking around for a process to work with, and as it turned out, my wife Heidi just booked me in spontaneously to one of Deloris Cannon's sessions. Does anyone know Deloris? Everybody familiar with Deloris Cannon? Anyone here done her courses? Oh, very good. Yeah, well, she was a revelation. I think that if I had have known about Deloris before I went there, I probably would not have even have gone to see her, because subsequently reading her books and just some of the things that are written about her on the net and that, it's just sort of so far away. Especially for a person like me who's interested in popular science and the scientific method, I really do love all that kind of thing, and all her books on conversations with Nostradamus and all these kinds of things were not really down my line of interest. But anyway, going along to do her course was really quite an amazing experience, because in Deloris I did find a lady who was willing to put in a lot of time to clients. She was very kind, for those of you who haven't met her, she was like a grandmother figure even then. She's been dead now, I think, 2 or 3 years. But I think when she was teaching me, she would have been in her mid-70s then too, so she was very much a sort of a grandmother figure. But, she had this process of how would I say, respect for the client. So in Deloris's method, what you do is that you first of all ascertain a question from the client, what the client might want to get from the session. So this she takes a fair bit of time to work with, just in the pre-talk that she does. So it's asking the client what they want, and then re-asking, and then asking again, and then trying to narrow down the question so that the focus is getting more and more tight in around what the client might be really wanting from the session, or what they might be thinking about in terms of a past life. And these might come from, it might be people that suspect they've got past lives or issues inside their subconscious, I might say, because when I talk about past lives, I'm not really quite sure I know really what I'm talking about anyway. I don't really know what I'm talking about with this life, to be quite honest though, either. Whether, you know, this life I have just as much trouble sort of explaining as a past life, really. And memories of yesterday or last year and, you know, memories from past lives, there's a very sort of a slippery sort of a thing that happens there in your mind. I'm not really quite sure that I could say anything that definitive about it anyway, just accept that it's important. It's very important for people. And the memories and the way it's obviously important for the way that we live our lives too, because it sort of sets you up, the memories of what you've done in the past, and that sets you up for what you're going to do into the future. So, but Deloris has this technique where you get this question from the client and then you put them into a trance and you get them to tell you a story. Very big on the metaphors, but looking for a story. You know what? So you have a metaphor to take someone to a certain place, and then she used to use this little cloud. She'd have it on a cloud, and then you'd come down off the cloud, and you'd be going back into the past and right back to find, you know, very much. Focused on in the talk that when you're speaking to the client of, you know, we're looking for the most appropriate time and the most appropriate place to. So subconsciously all this is sort of bubbling away for the client, and they usually have got a story that they'll tell. They come down and they're sort of landed somewhere and then so off you go. They'll tell you a story. Now that story may be true or maybe not true. For some people, you can see that it probably is a bit of a confabulation that they're doing. It might be just fairly intellectual, an intellectual exercise. But for others, it's not really quite like that. They are very much reliving something that they've experienced or that is there, because they're sort of feeling it bodily and you know, it's quite. They're all together there in the moment in the story that they're telling. But once that story comes out, then what Deloris does, you know, and sometimes she might even do 2 past lives or 3 in a session. But then after that, rather than the hypnotist or herself interpreting what is being said, and I might say, just as an aside, when I'm doing this with some of the clients that I've had, you hear people telling you some stories and you just think, how on earth could this story in any way relate to this question that the person's asked? It just seems to be so far apart, you wouldn't even think, you know, it totally befuddles me anyway sometimes after I've heard the story from a client, you know, when they've been through this process. But the next thing is to put the client into a little bit of a deeper trance again, and then you ask their own subconscious mind, certainly respectfully asking for permission from the subconscious mind. Is it okay if I speak with the subconscious mind? Getting permission to do that. And then asking the subconscious mind to explain the story. You know, you've brought along a very interesting story here today. You know, how does this relate to the question that John has asked here today? And then the subconscious mind will respond to that. So that's what I really liked about that whole process, the fact that I was kind of right outside of the system. I wasn't in any way, I'm never really involved with my client. I mean, I don't suppose you can ever say that, because to an extent there's always some of your own emotional noise that goes over to a client. But having said that, though, I think that Deloris's method is really one of the best that allows you to keep yourself disentangled from the client's story so that the client is interpreting things for themselves. Now, of course, so that's just a little bit about how I got sort of started in a little bit about Deloris's method. And I know there's some people that were really keen to have some practice with Deloris's method, but I might say it's her way of doing this is really different than. It's not real good if you want to make money from hypnosis, because usually these sessions can take, for me, you know, 3 hours is not abnormal. A 3-hour session, you know, I might spend an hour in pre-talk, and then, you know, perhaps an hour or so in hypnosis, and then maybe half an hour with the subconscious mind afterwards. And then, you know, the usual debrief and finishing off. So 3 hours can be quite normal. So, I mean, I still charge, you know, well, it's probably not a normal rate. I usually try to charge people at least $100 an hour. So I'm trying to get somewhere around about $300 from a session like that. But very often, as you would realise, there'd be a lot of people coming along that just can't afford that much money. So a lot of the work that I do, unfortunately, is subsidised, and probably I fall into that category that Ralph was talking about before, where you know, with the fees and everything you've got to do to keep, you know, to keep going as a hypnotist it doesn't tally. But that doesn't really worry me too much, because I'm, you know, I love what I do here, and I'm kind of learning all the time. I'm just so grateful to the clients that I've had for, you know, in what I've been able to learn over the years that I've been doing this with, you know, quite a few hundred people now.